let's work on sarcasm. Okay. Sarcasm is something that you can learn even when you have Asperger's. Okay. What you'll probably find is that people, when they're teenagers, start to learn it, and they kind of leaving it there anyway. And then they sort of, you might find that some teenagers feel like they're being picked on because they're not comprehending sarcasm, and they learn sarcasm later. When they learn it really well. Sometimes the people that learn it later are just doing so because of normal developmental stuff. Sometimes they're struggling because of autism. However, there is no, or whatever reason, maybe it's dyslexia or something else. The point is that if you are struggling with sarcasm, okay, um, okay, it doesn't necessarily mean you take language literally. You might be struggling with intentions. So, um, when it comes to really obvious stuff like let's go to the lighter. Go to the lighter. Turn on the lighter. Use the lighter. Oh, it's not working properly. The instruction was followed. Okay, it was pretty pretty um you know direct. The intent was to pick up the lighter. The lighter got picked up. It was a direct intention. It was easy. Um, when it comes to implied intention, okay, implied is a bit different. Okay, um, let's talk about why everyone is autistic. Okay, the reason why everyone is autistic is a statement to be taken as a joke, but it's also a statement to be taken as a genuine observation. You don't know what your intentions are when they're complicated, when you're in a complicated situation. You don't know what their intentions are, and moreover, they don't know what their intentions are. This assumption that anyone knows anyone's intentions is just an assumption. Okay? It is an assumption. This bullying of people saying that some people are worse at perceiving intentions than others, it's just that. Bullying. Bullying based on assumptions, presumptions, lies, and Darbo practices to try and say there's a group of people who are really good at intentions, there's a group of people who are really bad at it. Now, there are some people who know how to influence others, okay, but they aren't necessarily good at intentions. Okay, manipulation is the art of trying to get someone else to believe that your intentions are theirs. It's a disrespect of the sovereign right to have a different intention to you. Okay, um, what's another disrespect of people's sovereign right? Not telling people what your intentions are, presuming that they should automatically know. So, let's take for example, something that happened to people around the world during the colonial period. It's a familiar story, so it's easy to work with it. Don't take it out of context. It doesn't mean anything what's being said right now. So missionaries went to a foreign country to people with a drastically different culture from their own. I said, the devil has gotten to you. We're going to save you from them. I said, what's the devil? I said, everyone knows what the devil is. The devil is a bad guy. The devil appears to have been lying to this one, pretending he doesn't exist. Yes, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he doesn't exist. Oh, is that so, Vatican? Um, but those people have genuinely never heard of it. Oh, the devil kept them in the darkness. and preventing them from experiencing the true light of Christ. No, they were just doing something different for a while. Quite a long while actually, and they had their own opinions on how the world worked and based on their own observations and context, and it's just different from yours. Oh, no, the devil must have got to them. See, that sort of cultural myopia there, okay? Christianity in that context, missionary behaviour in that context, prevented the missionary from being aware that A, they had cultural myopia, and B, that they were actually deceiving, lying, forcing, in other words, acting like the devil. In that context, those individuals couldn't see that that's what they were doing. They couldn't see that those other people didn't have a devil to worship, genuinely didn't know what the missionary was talking about, because they just hadn't fucking heard of it. When they wandered around their countryside and went about their business, they had their way of looking at things, their language for describing it, and their business doing it. And it was their country and their culture and their language and their space, and they were allowed to. And the missionary came along and said, no, you're wrong. You're doing that because the devil told you to. The missionary is better. Become a Christian. Now, if you could understand just for a minute just how much unfair reasoning is behind that, and just how much that infiltrated European society, and just how much those missionaries were affected by their false sense of moral superiority, by their hypocrisy, by their double standards, to the point where they were ignorant of the fact that they were actually engaging in their description from their culture's perspective of what devil worship was, by even saying that to those people and ignoring the idea that those people, didn't have a devil because they're actually from a different culture, then you'll see just how dark that era really was for the missionaries who behaved like that. Because it also needs to be noted that other people did try, just not all of them. So the ones that didn't try and acted like that, acting like snobs, they were presuming that everyone saw the world the way they did, and if they didn't, there was something wrong with them. And what was wrong with them was caused by the devil. The greatest trick that the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he doesn't exist. Really. What about the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the Vatican that he does? How did that trick happen? First of all, look at the forced deception tricky that there's some egregor or creation called devil. It's comprised of a false sense of superiority, like a missionary. A false sense of truth, like religious zealot. A false sense of jurisdiction, like an invading army. Pride. Yes, you're better than other people because you're spouting the mantras of that group. Dishonesty. They were somehow morally corrupt for not knowing about those people's fairy tales. What else? Sloth. Blackie can work in the garden for you. You'll just sit in the fucking in the big house telling them the devil get them if they don't fucking do it. That'd be sloth. No, they're definitely sitting until they have. Yeah, they the Catholic ones. Oh, last. We won't go into what the Royal Commission found. We'll let that one go. But it also involved adults, in case you're wondering, just to allay that concern. What else? Wrath. If you're right with your left hand, you'll get the switch. What else? Envy. It looks like a good spot to go to put a farm on. Get out of the fucking way. They're not fettered by the iron yoke of the aristocracy. That will qualify as envy as well. What else? Lust, envy, wrath. What else is there? Sloth. Yeah, there's a few covered there. Dishonesty. Okay. That's part of the hypocrisy. Let's talk about when the Huns invaded Rome. When the Huns invaded Rome, they chucked rats over the fence. They were infected with a plague. There's been more than one plague. The Huns did one of them. They set fire to farmlands in the outer districts surrounding the Seven Hills of Rome. They were not from there, they were from Hunland. These days probably called Hungary. Or thereabouts. They acted with extreme violence. However, they believed their violence was retaliatory because the Romans had come to their territories and harassed them really badly. Same with other groups. So, those groups felt justified in their retaliation. They felt justified in their rage. They felt justified in throwing poisoned, diseased rats over the fence into Rome. And then Rome turned around and said, well, you're all crucified now. But he is without sin to cast the first stone. Turn the other cheek. And had these snobbish characters in frocks walk around and tell people that men aren't allowed to wear dresses because being gay is a crime. But if you're working for the Pontifex Maximus, that's acceptable. Get your stupid robe off, please. You're only allowed to wear a robe if you're in a monastery. Stop it. And that's how Rome won. By appealing to, you don't want to be a hypocrite, do you? It could get you killed. Type of logic. Because, Christ is love and light, and the devil doesn't use force, deception, or trickery, does he? Go on then. If Christians are without sin, may they cast the first stone? Wait, they're not. Perhaps it's time for the Huns to throw Molotov cocktails over the fences of churches so they stop demonising people every fucking Sunday. The more you want people to be Christian, the less they will. Not only has Christianity, over the course of history, turned out to be factually in error, but it's also morally in error. It doesn't mean you have to go to any of these so-called alternatives. It doesn't mean you have to be possessed by demons or AI, or that you're demonic for any reason. You're allowed to challenge the patricians. You're allowed to do that. And you're allowed to trick their Praetorian Guard to flog them as well. And you're allowed to do it without any shame whatsoever. Heck, you're even allowed to do it by accident. But what you're not allowed to do is tell people that have no devil. They're devil worshippers. But not believing in the same crap you do. And so for that reason, every Catholic school and every Christian school in the world and every Muslim and Jewish school and other schools that preach similar ideas should be shut down. You shouldn't be allowed to teach your children any religion at all. Doesn't matter if it's those ones or the other ones. Doesn't matter if it's New Age fluff or not. It doesn't even matter if it's native religion. You shouldn't be allowed to teach your kids any cult shit at all. And you should just leave all the books open, let them decide for themselves, and don't do anything until they're 25. Just leave them alone. Let's talk about fucking territorialism and about whose land it is and whose culture it is and whatever the fuck else, or men have the right to determine the borders of a society or whatever, because it's a patricianarchy or some bullshit like that. It wasn't a patricianarchy when allegedly the Queen of England was the boss of the British fucking Empire, and she was one of the longest serving monarchs they ever fucking had. I mean, ceremonially she was still one of the longest ones. No, but for some reason it was a patricianarchy. You know, she was in charge. Oh wait, so she wasn't in charge. So a person's social status and whether or not they're sitting on a throne doesn't determine whether or not they're in charge. That's interesting. So you can sit on a throne without being in charge. Fascinating. Okay, so that would mean President Trump is not in charge of the USA, wouldn't it? I mean, there's the Senate or Congress to start off with. There's always cabinet ministers, and then there's, of course, Larry Fink controlling the Aladdin software. So, as it turns out, who's the boss, who's in charge, depends on what, where, and how, and when. So your stupid idea of fucking thrones, your stupid ideas of, what's this crap from the Bible of the devil is the god of this world? Why would you want that for? Why would Christians and biblical people want to curse people with something like that? We don't understand you. We don't comprehend. We don't comprehend how any culture is better than the other. Okay, but who is without sin cast the first stone? Well, that wouldn't be anyone. Except for people under 15. Give them all your fucking rocks and have them throw them at you.